You may have seen this happen more times than you can count. You reach for your keys, and before you say a word, your dog stands up. Sometimes he is already watching you. Sometimes he appears from another room as if he knew something was about to happen. Most people barely think about it. They assume the dog heard the keys, or noticed movement, or simply got lucky. And sometimes that may be true. But there is another possibility. Because in many homes, dogs seem to react before anything important has actually happened. Before the door opens, before the leash appears, before anyone says, let's go. It's almost as if they already know what comes next. And that raises an interesting question. If dogs are supposed to live only in the present moment, how do they seem so prepared for things that haven't happened yet? Perhaps the answer is not prediction at all. Perhaps it begins with something much quieter: memory. Not memory in the human sense, but memory that may help a dog recognize patterns, routines, and small details that repeat day after day. And once you start noticing those moments, many everyday behaviors begin to look a little different. One reason this behavior surprises people is because of something we hear so often. Dogs live in the moment, and in some ways that idea is true. Dogs are not usually thinking about the future the way humans do. They are not making long term plans. They are not replaying every detail of yesterday. But that does not necessarily mean the past disappears. In fact, everyday life with a dog often suggests the opposite. A dog may recognize a familiar route after months away. He may react to a word he has not heard in weeks. He may walk into a place and behave as though it still means something to him. These moments are easy to overlook because they seem so ordinary. Most owners simply accept them as part of having a dog. Yet each of these small reactions raises the same question. If the dog is responding differently because of something that happened before, then some form of memory is already involved. The more closely you watch, the harder it becomes to see dogs as animals responding only to what is happening right now. Instead, many of their choices may be shaped by experiences that have been quietly accumulating over time. And once you begin looking for that pattern, you start noticing it almost everywhere. One of the easiest places to notice memory is during a walk. At first, it may seem like your dog is simply enjoying the moment. He is sniffing, looking around, moving from one interesting scent to another. But then something curious happens. You reach a familiar corner, and suddenly his pace changes. Perhaps he starts pulling slightly ahead. Perhaps his tail begins moving a little faster. Perhaps he turns before you do, almost as if he already knows where the walk is going. Many owners have seen this near a favorite park, a familiar trail, or a place their dog enjoys visiting. And the interesting part is that nothing special may be visible yet. The destination is still out of sight, yet the dog's behavior has already changed. This may happen because the route itself has become familiar, not just the final destination, the turns, the landmarks, the sequence of places passed along the way. Over time, these details can become part of a pattern the dog recognizes. And that changes the way we think about memory. Uh, because memory is not only about people, voices, or routines inside the home, it may also include the environment itself, the paths your dog walks, the places he visits, and the routes he has traveled many times before, which means your dog may be remembering more of the world around him than we often realize. But memory is not only about places, sometimes it appears in a much quieter way, inside your daily routine. You put on your shoes, your dog looks up, you reach for your keys, he stands. A few seconds later, he is already waiting by the door. Most people focus on the last signal: the keys, the leash, the door opening. But dogs may be paying attention much earlier than that. Many everyday activities happen in the same order again and again. You finish working, close your laptop, stand up from your chair, put on your jacket, pick up your keys, leave the house. After seeing this sequence hundreds of times, a dog may begin responding before the final step ever arrives, not because he understands your plans in a human sense, and not because he is reading your mind. Instead, he may be recognizing a familiar pattern that has repeated many times before. One event leads to another, and eventually, the beginning of the sequence becomes meaningful on its own. That is why some dogs start getting excited when a laptop closes, or become alert when a jacket comes out of the closet. To us, those actions may seem unrelated. To the dog, they may already be part of a story he has seen many times before. And once a dog begins recognizing these patterns, the world can become surprisingly predictable, which raises another interesting question. If dogs remember sequences of events, what happens when words become part of those patterns too? By this point, memory starts becoming a little more personal because dogs are not only surrounded by routines, they are also surrounded by words. Most people know that dogs can learn simple commands, but everyday life contains many other words that are repeated over and over again. The name of a family member, the name of a favorite park, the word walk, the word treat, even short phrases that become part of a regular routine. At first, these words may not mean very much, but when the same word is repeatedly followed by the same experience, something begins to change. Over time, the word and the experience become connected. A dog hears the name of a place and becomes alert. He hears the name of a person and moves toward the door. Sometimes the reaction appears before anything else has happened, and that is what makes these moments so interesting. The dog may not be responding to the sound alone. He may be responding to everything that sound has come to represent, the experiences attached to it, the expectations attached to it, the memories built around it. In many homes, these connections develop quietly over months or even years, and eventually a simple word can carry much more meaning than people realize, which suggests that memory may not only be helping dogs recognize patterns, it may also be helping them attach meaning to the world around them. Words are only one part of the picture. Sometimes the strongest reminders seem to come from places. Many owners have experienced something like this. You return to a park your dog has not visited in a long time, and almost immediately his behavior changes. His pace becomes quicker, his attention sharpens, his body seems more engaged than it was just moments before. The same thing can happen when arriving at a friend's house, a familiar trail, a vacation cabin, or, in some cases, a veterinary clinic. Even before reaching the entrance, some dogs appear to recognize where they are. Of course, dogs experience places differently than humans do. They are noticing scents, sounds, landmarks, and countless details that people often miss. But what makes these moments so interesting is that the reaction may appear long after the previous visit, sometimes weeks later, sometimes months. Yet the place still seems to matter, and not always in the same way. Some locations appear to create excitement, others seem to create caution. Some simply attract a dog's attention more quickly than unfamiliar places, which suggests that certain locations may carry meaning beyond what is happening in the moment, as though the place itself has become connected to earlier experiences. And that leads to an important question. When a dog reacts to a familiar place after a long time away, how much of that reaction is happening because of memory itself? This is where research begins to make the picture a little clearer. Scientists have spent years trying to understand what dogs actually remember and how that memory works. One particularly interesting study came from researchers at Eötvös Loránd University in Hungary. They wanted to know whether dogs could remember information from an event even when they had no reason to expect they would need that information later. What they found was surprising. The dogs were sometimes able to recall information from past events and use it afterward, even though they did not appear to be preparing for a test. In simple terms, the findings suggested that dogs may remember more than just things they were specifically trained to learn. Some everyday experiences may leave a lasting impression as well. Of course, this does not mean dogs remember the past exactly as humans do. But it does suggest that memory may play a larger role in their daily lives than many people once believed. And when you think about the behaviors we've already discussed, that idea starts to feel very familiar. The route your dog recognizes, the words that seem to matter, the places that still trigger a reaction months later. Perhaps those moments are not isolated at all. Perhaps they are small signs of a mind that has been quietly collecting information for much longer than we realize, and that may help explain something owners notice all the time. The strange way dogs sometimes seem to know what is about to happen before it happens. This may be the point where dog memory starts to look almost mysterious. A car turns into the driveway, and before anyone reaches the front door, the dog is already alert. A leash appears from the closet, and excitement begins before the walk has started. A certain time of day arrives, and the dog heads toward the same spot he visits every evening. Moments like these can feel surprisingly accurate, almost as if the dog is predicting the future. But in many cases, something else may be happening. The dog is not necessarily seeing what comes next. He may be recognizing what usually comes next, and that is a very important difference. Over weeks, months, and years, life tends to repeat itself. The same events happen in similar sequences. The same sounds are followed by the same outcomes. The same routines unfold again and again. Eventually, the pattern itself becomes familiar. When one piece appears, the dog may already expect the next piece to follow. Not because he knows the future, but because he has seen the pattern so many times before. And once you begin looking at behavior this way, many everyday moments start making more sense. The dog waiting by the door, the dog becoming excited before a walk, the dog reacting before anyone else notices that something is about to happen. Perhaps these are not examples of prediction at all. Perhaps they are examples of memory quietly working in the background, turning past experience into expectation. And that may be one of the most remarkable things dogs do every single day. The easiest way to understand this idea is not through a study and not through a theory, it's through observation. The next time you spend a normal day with your dog, try watching for something very specific. Look for the moment your dog reacts before an event actually happens, before the walk begins, before a family member comes through the door, before the food bowl appears, before you leave the house. When that moment happens, pause for a second and ask yourself a simple question. What clue did my dog notice first? Was it the sound of keys, the closing of a laptop, a familiar time of day, the movement of a jacket? Very often, there is a small detail that appears before the event itself, and over time, your dog may have learned that the detail and the outcome belong together. This is where memory often becomes visible, not when the event happens, but in the few moments before it happens, in the anticipation, in the expectation, in the quiet confidence that something familiar is about to occur. Once you start looking for these moments, they appear surprisingly often, and they reveal something important. Many of the behaviors that seem mysterious at first may actually be built from experiences your dog has been collecting for years. Perhaps the most interesting part of all this is that we may never fully know what the world feels like from a dog's perspective. We know their memory is not identical to ours. We know they do not think exactly as humans do. And yet, the more closely we watch them, the harder it becomes to believe they are simply moving from one moment to the next without carrying anything forward. A familiar route, a familiar word, a familiar place, a sequence of events that has happened hundreds of times before. These small pieces seem to stay with them, quietly shaping how they respond to the world around them. When your dog stands up as you reach for your keys, when he heads toward a favorite path before you turn the corner, when he reacts to something that has not happened yet, perhaps you are seeing the result of countless observations collected over months and years, not dramatic memories, not memories told as stories, but memories built from repetition, experience, and attention. And maybe that is what makes dogs so remarkable. While we are often busy thinking about what comes next, they are constantly noticing what happens again and again, learning from it, remembering it, and carrying those lessons into the next moment. So the next time your dog seems to know more than he should, consider a different possibility. Perhaps he has simply been paying attention all along, more closely than we ever realized.